I want you guys to peep this game that's being played by the demon crabs. Now, it's not by coincidence that these four women are the forefront of the demon crab party. Primarily, Ilhan Omar, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib. I believe that's how you pronounce her name. Now, to be perfectly honest, I'm not familiar with Ayanna Pressley. She's new. Maybe she's been around a little bit, but I don't know too much about her because the only tweets that I really see against Trump is Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. But it's not by coincidence that this is what they perceive as women of color. But peep this game. The demon crabs are playing the race card in the name of Black Americans. But it don't benefit Black Americans. None of what they're talking about, none of what they're protesting, none of what they're fighting for benefits the so-called Black Americans. But they're fighting and protesting for illegal immigrants, encouraging other illegal immigrants to break into this country illegally. And if they break into this country illegally, they will be rewarded with free health care, free lodging, shelter, food, water. So that inspires other illegals to come in the wrong way. But we keep hearing about racism. And it's funny because the ones that's crying the loudest about racism and accusing Trump of being a racist are racist themselves. That's why they have these so-called women of color in the forefront, because white Americans are now afraid to speak out against wrong when they see a so-called woman of color or man of color in the forefront. It's not by coincidence. That's why Joe Biden, when Kamala Harris attacked Joe Biden playing the race card, Joe Biden really didn't know how to respond because he's dealing with a so-called woman of color. But wait, none of those so-called women of color originated in the United States. And see, that's what's wrong with the immigration law. When you have an illegal immigrant that will cross the border illegally, and the immigrant woman will give birth to a child, although she's illegal, now this child now can say, I was born in the United States. This is my country, but yet your parents were illegal. And that's what Ilhan Omar, Ocasio-Cortez, and Rashida Tlaib is claiming. We were born here. We're citizens. This is our country. But yet, if you watch their actions, if you watch the tweets that they post, is extremely anti-American. What they're protesting and what they're fighting for is anti-American. And is pro-criminals, illegal immigration. So I'm going to read the tweet that Trump put out there, because now you have the fake news media, you have CNN now pouncing on the fact that Trump, and see, that's what I like about Trump. He's not like Geraldo Rivera that would take a punch to the nose. And those of you that lived at that time period or remember what happened to Geraldo Rivera when he had a guest on his show, he got punched in the nose. His nose was broken. So everybody is not just going to take a punch to the nose. You just can't break anybody's nose, because you have a certain group of people that's willing to fight back. So they're constantly bombarding tweets against Trump, anti-Trump, saying how he's a racist and xenophobic and all of these attacks upon Trump, and they expect him to just sit back and say nothing, just take the punches. Whereas at the same time, they're putting these tweets out there, defaming his name, defaming his character. You have people that's unlearned, that's listening to that, that's going to believe it, especially if it's being carried by the fake news media. So Trump defends himself. And so they take what he says and only gives you a portion of what he says. They mix the truth with a lie. They distort what he says to make it appear that he's racist, to make it appear that he's just straight out telling them, go back to your own country because of your race, or because of your nationality, or because of your culture. When in reality, that's not what he said. Now I'm going to read what Trump said. This is what he tweeted. So interesting to see, and he's got in quotes progressive Democrat congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are a complete and total catastrophe. The worst, the most corrupt and inept anywhere in the world. And then he's got in parentheses, if they even have a functioning government at all. Now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and fix? Better yet, I'm going to read this just like it's written. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how. And he's correct in that. That's what he wrote. I'm going to read that second part again, and you tell me if he's wrong in that, because I say the same thing, especially when Ilhan Omar talk about how she was in some type of camp and she had no running water. And she was heard about America and how great America is in a nutshell. And now she's here and they pushed her to the top, because nothing is really earned when it comes to these immigrants that the Democrats push to the forefront. It's like the African dude that's been here for 12 years here in the city of Syracuse, and now he's running for a political office. Some white people raised him. Now they pushed him to the forefront and he's running for a political position. Now keep in mind, and I mentioned this in a prior video, that keep in mind, if you come to the city of Syracuse, or any city for that matter, every now and then you may find a couple of Africans that will mingle with the so-called Black Americans. But for the most part, they stay to themselves. The Africans here stay to themselves. They don't care too much for the so-called Black Americans. I've had Africans that even tell me that they don't like the so-called Black Americans. In their mind, they feel, how could you be in a country as great as it is and still be impoverished? They refer to the so-called Black Americans as Akatas. They think very low of the so-called Black Americans. So Africans don't even mingle or associate with the so-called Black Americans. Again, like I said, you may have a couple, and you may have a couple of Black females that may marry an African man, or I don't know of too many Black American men that marry an African woman. I really don't know too many because they're encouraged not to marry the so-called Black Americans, right? So now this same African that don't associate with so-called Black Americans now running for political office, and guess where he's targeting? The so-called Black American votes. Now he's trying to do little things to try to help the so-called Black American. Everybody wants to come here and help the poor, helpless Black Americans. So now they're playing the race card in the name of the so-called Black Americans. And guess who don't benefit from them? So-called Black Americans. Their target is the illegal immigrants because that's the vote they're targeting. They're trying to get these people here, give them driver's license so that when voting time comes around, they really don't need the Black vote anymore. They're pushing Black people aside, but yet what they have to do is put the face of what appear to be women of color. Now, the most outspoken ones are Ilhan Omar, Ocasio-Cortez, and Talib. They happen to throw in the face of a Black female now, an American-born African American. They threw her face because she's the one that carries the most weight. She's the one that they can say racism. He's a white supremacist. But in reality, that's all they've been spewing is is racism and hatred. So when they start tweeting things like love, love, we're trying to love, we're about love, I always ask a question which I never get a response. So do you love President Trump? If you're so into love and loving everybody and doing away with hate, do you love President Trump? And if you love President Trump, why are you constantly attacking him? So those were his tweets. Tell me what's wrong with that, because I even say the same thing. If you have all of these ideas and you're now protesting, you have all of this zeal and talking about what needs to change in America, but yet the places you come from, you ran from places seeking asylum. You came here, your parents came here saying they're seeking asylum from war-torn places, poverty-stricken places, and yet you're gonna come here and want to now change America to be like the place you ran from or your parents ran from. And again, it's sad that these illegal immigrant women will come here, give birth on American soil, have children that will grow up in America, now running for political office to benefit the place they came from, to try to draw more people over here. This is no more than a hostile takeover. This is a hostile takeover. This is a movie, and I spoke on this in the past, Red Dawn. If you have not seen that movie, it might be on Netflix and it might be on Amazon. But try to find that movie Red Dawn and watch that movie, and you will see how Mexico came in and invaded the United States. Right now, America, the United States, is being invaded. They're trying to destroy the strong man of the house, which is the white race. The white man controls it. But then you have white people that's paid off, that's going to be paid to destroy America, torching and burning America. That's what we see happening. So black people need to be offended that they will use and play the race card in your name to get votes. They're promoting their own agenda and you are not included. I don't care how much they start talking about, and notice, whenever they talk about black people, they always want to talk education. We need more education, health care. But yet when it comes to reparations, they have a problem with that, but they have no problem with that $700 and some odd billion that Congress just approved. That's complete nonsense, and they put blocks so that President Trump can't even work. The Democrats are the reason why this country is being overflowed with illegal immigrants. They're the reason why. And I don't blame them for being in putting them in cages, because they're criminals. They don't belong here. They put themselves in that situation because the message went forward to them not to come. But yet the Democrats are sending people there, teaching them what to say to break into this country. We're dealing with a rogue government, rogue Congress people, and they're going to try to do as much damage as they can before they're voted out of office. But while they're in right now, they're doing a lot of destruction. And I made a video before I deleted my Fearless 2005 channel. I made a video of number one about torching and burning America, but I also made a couple of videos about the silent or the sleeping terror cells. We're dealing with a different level of terrorism. Of course, we may not be hearing about bombs and things exploding and car bombs or whatever, but we're dealing with a rogue government that's doing a whole lot of damage. Divide and conquer. The illegal immigrants are a Trojan horse. They are the Trojan horse. They're going to be the destruction of this country. The illegal immigrants and the rogue government that's now pushing for illegal immigration, because the Democrats are losing ground, they're losing power. And the thing that upsets me the most is the fact that the Republicans or the conservatives allow this to go down. It appears that the Democrats, of course, are the strongest, because while they're doing investigation upon investigation upon investigation upon attacks, the Republicans are doing nothing. I don't see anything the Republicans are doing to defend themselves and to really defend this country. It appears that Trump and his supporters are the only ones that's really concerned about the future or the direction of this country. But yet when it comes to the Democrats, they're flooding the presidential race with Democrats, because what's going to happen is when you start seeing them drop off, those followers are now going to hook on to somebody else, right? They're playing a game. They're playing chess. And the only people that can't see the game are the majority of the so-called black Americans that's still stuck on the Democrat plantation. But peep the game that they're playing, the faces that they're using. Even in Texas, They keep posting on Facebook about all of these black females that are judges in the courts. Why are they putting black females in these positions? Why are they using these same black females that they fed welfare to when they kicked the men out of the home and left these women to raise children by themselves? Now their sons are dying in the street, their daughters are pregnant, and now they're raising children on their own with multiple baby daddies, turning lesbians, saying how they don't need men. These are the ones that they're putting on the forefront now because they have no souls, or they've lost their souls, or it's easy for them to sell their souls to the system. It's preparing them to sell their souls. So, and I might make a video on that. That's heavy. That just came to my mind. That's heavy. So now you have the face of so-called women of color, and the faces they put on the forefront aren't even black American women. But yet, these females are now considered to be the women of color, replacing black women, but they needed an American black female. They needed her face, although you really don't hear much about her. I have not heard about Ayanna Pressley. I have not heard about her. Maybe she's been around, but the ones that's been outspoken the most is Ocasio-Cortez, Rashida Tlaib, and Ilhan Omar. Those are the ones that I've heard, but now they threw a black woman in there because she's the one that really carries the weight when it comes to pushing the race card to try to get black votes. And then once they get your votes, black people, you're now pushed further aside because now the illegal immigrants are taking your place. This is a game, and the so-called black Americans should be upset. You should be offended because they're playing the race card. Whenever you hear them talk about racism, he's a racist, he's a white supremacist, all this stuff developed or was created back during slavery time and coming up during the Jim Crow, the Civil Rights Movement, which none of these people had to endure, or their ancestors never endured. Just like they put Barack Obama as the first black president, and then Joe Biden stood up and says, well, no, it wasn't Joe Biden. What's that politician name? Stood up and said, we gave you Obama for reparations. And he was not a black American. What's her name? Kamala Harris. Is a descendant of slave owners. So none of these so-called women of color were actual slaves or descendants of slaves. So think about that, black women. When you see a so-called brown face or black face and you know that they weren't born here in America, they were not descendant of slaves, they cannot relate to you. They can't. That's why it's easy for them to stand up. And I'm going to do a video and I think I spoke on this before, when Ilhan Omar attacked that black woman for saying that she was able to pick herself up from nothing. And Ilhan Omar attacked her. So they don't want the so-called black Americans to be independent. They want you to remain on the bottom because the only thing that you're good for is votes. That's all you're good for when it comes to the Democrats. The only thing you're good for are votes and your support to get them in position to be able to work out their agenda, to get their agenda through, which does not include you. So, feedback, tell me what you think, subscribe. Until next time, I'm fearless.